Okay, now we're going to be talking a little bit about his thesis. Or Brian Magee is going to introduce the 4 categories of the necessary connections. Necessary connections, synonymous to the sufficient reason. What is to be deemed in Schopenhauer's mind the sufficient reason. His central thesis, hence his title, Principle of Sufficient Reason, is that sufficient reasons are not of one logical type, but fall into 4 main categories. I have rearranged his order so as to bring out more clearly the way they follow from each other. 1. In the physical world. Okay, we're going to go through all 4 now. The first one. In the physical world, sufficient reasons take the form of causes. Event A causes event B. In the world of organic matter, we may in some cases dub these stimuli. Event A stimulates event B, but stimuli can be regarded as a special subclass of causes. And the defining difference being that the action of all other kinds of cause is quantitatively equal to the reaction, for example, the amount of energy released. Whereas the action of a stimulus may be smaller or greater than the response to it. Schopenhauer is insistent that the cause of an event can be only another event. It cannot be an object or state of affairs. Objects and state of affairs are brought into and pushed out of existence by sequences of causally interconnected events, which, taken all together, constitute the ongoing history of the natural world, which is to say the whole physical universe. This is causal connection as conceived in Newtonian science and biology. Okay, that was the first point. The first necessary connection. The second, this ongoing history takes place in a framework of time and space. Every point in time is absolutely determined with respect to every other, and from this fact can be derived the whole of arithmetic. Similarly, every point in space is absolutely determined with respect to every other, and from this fact can be derived the whole of geometry. Quick side note before I continue. I remember reading Julian Young's book. Yeah, I've done a couple of videos on Schopenhauer before from reading hers. She was more of a critical evaluator, and when it came to Schopenhauer's view about time and space in relation to reality, he seemed to, as Julian Young presented, if I remember correctly, her criticism, that, and it wasn't, of course, a detrimental criticism, but nonetheless it's to be taken into consideration, to be noted here, that this idea of Euclidean geometry matching with reality has been proved false over and over again. That our conception of space or particular geometry is not as it is as perceived in reality. So just something to keep in mind. How that affects here, perhaps not detrimentally, but it would have to take some rewording on this part for Schopenhauer, not for Brian Magee. Make that clear. Okay. Where were we? Yes. The history of the universe then takes place in a framework whose forms are mathematical, indeed whose a priori forms give us our mathematics, which is why mathematics fits the world in the way it does. So whereas the ongoing history of sufficient reasons are causal, the framework of time and space are mathematical. Thus, a second sense in which A can be a sufficient reason for B is that A can be a mathematical determination or demonstration of B. Okay, number 3 now. There is a special class of organic physical objects which can be moved in space and time, not only from without, by causes including stimuli and things, but also from within, by motives. Any given object with its unique set of determinate characteristics can, in any unique set of circumstances, react to any one motive in only one way. So the actions of these agents, though internally motivated, are as determined as natural events. Motives are caused experience from within. Thus, a third way in which A can be a sufficient reason for B is that A can be a motive and B the action motivated. In parentheses, Brian Magee is going to mention about the whole idea about the freedom of the will and things. In the late 20th century, the analysis of the problem of the freedom of will, which seems to be more widely accepted amongst philosophers than any other, for example, that to be found in the most standard textbook expositions, is the same as Schopenhauer's, to which there is a great deal more than appears at first sight in the foregoing simplification. This being so, in holding over a full consideration of it until the next chapter, I am not asking my readers to make any particular special waivers. In other words, Schopenhauer goes into more detail on the freedom of will, so even if it seems like an oversimplification here, it must have some more justification in what's later to come. That being said, number 4 now, and we'll do a quick summary after this. The medium internal to these animate physical objects through which motives operate is mind. It is the mind. In the mind, judgments are formed, and judgments guide action. At this point, for the first time, we encounter the notion of truth. For judgments may be indeed, must be indeed, either true or false. The fourth sense, then, in which A can be a sufficient reason for B, is that A can entail the truth of proposition B. There are, in turn, 4 distinguishable ways in which the truth of a proposition can be entailed. And he's going to give us a list of A, B, C, and D for this 4th point. A can be entailed by direct observation or experience, in which case it is an empirical truth because it's an immediate observation of our experience. B, it can be one of necessary presuppositions of experience. See chapters 3 and 4. For such instance are a priori propositions about space, time, and indeed the whole of mathematics, or about causality and the indestructibility of matter. These would be labeled transcendental truths. And letter C now. It can follow from the truth of another proposition according to the laws of logic, in which case it is a logical truth. If it follows logically from a true empirical statement, we often call it a material truth. And lastly D, it can itself be one of the laws of logic, in which case it is a metalogical truth. Of those, there are 4 laws of logic, the first being the law of identity, the second of law of contradiction, the third being the law of excluded middle, and the 4th being the principle that truth consists in correspondence to reality. Thus, to sum up the 4 kinds of necessary connections, all 4 points, to which Schopenhauer refers in the title of his book, are causation, as understood in science, in mathematical determination, that's the second, in logical entailment, that's the third, and in motivated action, that's the 4th. According to him, all examples of necessary connection must fall into one of these 4 categories.